So yeah, welcome to Synapse. My name is Martine Stillman. I'm the VP of Engineering here at Synapse. Synapse is a product development consultancy. So we're roughly, for the past 20 years, we've been helping to bring hardware solutions together for some of our clients' toughest problems. We have clients that range the spectrum from Fortune 50 clients, Nike's been one of our largest clients for years, to, a panoply of startups trying to do things like harvesting food at greater rates. So we have a multidisciplinary team here. In the past couple of years, we've been working on increasing the people and planet-focused business. When it comes to planet-focused business, we actually have two sides of the house. So we have a climate tech side, which includes things like carbon capture, but also things like sustainable agriculture and improving food waste. And then we also have a sustainable product development practice. That includes helping all of our clients, no matter what they're making, to do better and to try and approach it in a more sustainable way, which includes things like design for circularity. So we're really excited to be hosting this panel, and we're going to talk a lot about the challenges of circularity today, how you can approach the practicality of circularity and help to unlock some of those challenges. But the real answer that we found is that the answer to some of these circular problems is it depends, right? It depends on every business model. Every product is different. Every material stream has its own unique challenges. So the answer to your problem might be that the relationship does not exist. The solution that you need does not exist. We're excited to host you for networking because we are hopeful that you will build deeper relationships that could unlock those problems, maybe starting here today. So I'm going to start with intros. Why don't I start at this end? I'm joined by Zahlen Titcomb, CEO and co-founder at Ravel. Zahlen, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, that's me. Ravel is a circular economy solution for textile waste. So the world we operate in is like a materials and kind of like a waste, taking waste in and translating that with our IP into raw materials that can go back into the supply chain in a circular model. Thank you for all wearing clothing. That's a good thing. Challenge though, check your label, see if it's cotton. Is it organic? Is it recyclable? Do you know if it's recyclable? Do you know what is going to happen to it when you're done with it? Is it blended? All these things are challenges that exist from a material standpoint, and then also from the ecosystem on every single person that is involved in turning that end-of-life clothing back into new clothing again. Excited to be here. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. I'm also joined by Adrian Tan, Policy and Market Development Manager in Recycling and Environmental Services at King County. Adrian, do you want to talk a little bit more about your work?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for inviting me. Yes, I work at King County Solid Waste Division, where we manage a lot of the waste in King County and the cities around King County. I have the opportunity to work with statewide policy related to reuse and recycling, as well as manage a grant program called Next Cycle Washington.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Reily Blackner. Reily is an electrical engineer here at Synapse, but has also submitted a big little talk, which showed on the big screen yesterday, right after Jay Inslee's intro. You may have seen him there. And Reilly's also the architect of many of Synapse's internal tools on circularity and sustainable design. Reily, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. I'm an electrical engineer at Synapse. I've been here for a total of 5 years, and one of my predominant focuses has been in agriculture and also our sustainable design tools and developing relationships with people in different places around the world. So I've been to Japan to talk to folks about ag tech there, and then also sustainable design forum and circular design forum in the Netherlands. So yeah.
Right. All right, so Adrian, I think we're going to start with you. We'd love to hear more about what's happening in King County, and if there are any trends you see happening both on a local or a global stage.
Well, one thing is happening. Our landfill is getting filled up. By 2040, our landfill will be filled. So we need to think of something else than what we're currently doing. We've made great progress together with cities, residents, businesses, the waste management companies, local NGOs, communities in getting stuff recycled, collecting the organics, getting that out of the landfill and composting. For the past 10 years, things have stagnated. It's actually gone down, the amount of recycling, which is a bit weird when you think about this concept of circular economy didn't really exist in people's mind. Sure, people were doing things that we now call circular, but it's only in the past 10 years where we started really using the term circular economy. About 70% of what currently goes to our landfill are things, materials and products that could be recovered economically with environmental benefits. These are things that could be donated, resold, it could be repaired, remanufactured, recovered in so many ways, recycled. There's so much food waste still going to our landfill. There's so much electronics, batteries, loads of materials with valuable materials still going out there. So that's what's currently going on in King County, and we're all contributing to that. But when we talk about globally, I think, I'm sure everybody's noticed, we do get, I mean, the weather's been great this year, right? But we do get extreme weather events, and it's coming closer. It's hitting closer to home. Wildfires are happening. We're seeing washer shortages in places that we didn't know about. We're seeing plastic being washed up to our oceans, finding it on trails, in lakes and rivers, in quantities that we haven't seen before. And I think we're starting to acknowledge what we do, our consumption patterns, our production patterns are hitting us back. We've gone through globalization, we've made the connections, but I think we're also seeing those connections of climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, but also we've been exporting waste for many years to other countries, and stuff that is enjoyed here end up in other places in the world that they should probably not be.
Absolutely. Reily, I know this audience is probably familiar with some of the circularity and waste topics that Adrian just touched on, but could you talk us through the concept of circularity for those who might not be quite so familiar? Can you summarize how circularity works, but also, you know, where companies might commonly encounter some problems?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that, you know, I've been trying to do is like simplify the concept of the best way to describe it to folks, and it kind of summarizes in like, where does it come from? You know, where does it go, and how do we get it back? And I think
there's a song.
Yeah, I know. Try not to say it in that cadence. It's hard. And then another part of that too is, you know, the clients that come to us and stuff like that in terms of product development and all these kinds of things. I think some of the problems are relatively common across industries. I think that we tend to get people who come in the door with a lot of assumptions, predetermined assumptions about their products and their focuses, you know, and things like that. And one of the things that we've kind of tried to help a lot of folks with, and you know, a lot of people try to do this through policy and things like that, is how do you get reclamation plays and reverse logistics involved into their products, and how do you know, do resourcing and of non-virgin materials and things along those lines. And then, you know, one of the simplest ones that I feel like I always kind of bring up is just labeling things. I'm like really into labeling, and yeah, and I you know, I think those are some of the common problems that we see, and then also some of the stuff that really not super difficult to do, but it is like a pretty hard change in terms of the mentality around it, and also business practices and things along those lines too.
Absolutely. And you just hit, I think, 4 or 5 problems that every company will need to solve, which is a lot of challenges to start with. Zahlen, so Reily just highlighted a bunch of the challenge areas, and I know that Ravel is focused in particular on one, you know, really sticky issue that's blocking the circularity of textiles and the garment industry at large. Can you speak a little bit as to how you came to wanting to address that particular challenge, and also the ramifications that Ravel might have for, you know, the larger garment industry?
Yeah. made clothes for a lot of years. I had a apparel brand, and so there's probably a lot of what I made out there in landfill right now. It's just like, but then I fast forward a bunch of years, came together with a group here in Seattle, and we decided like somebody should do something about this. It's that bottom of the pyramid. It's like, yeah, you can throw your can in the recycling, and it's like there's a system for that, but there's not really a system for this like massive linear economy for textiles. And so somebody should do something about that. Enter Ravel. And so we've been hustling on it for a couple of years now. And one of the things that's become super obvious in the way that these solutions come together is that, everybody in the circle has to come to the table. We're this like IP place down here where what we do is special and we can translate the clothes. But if we don't have a concentration of waste in one place, the reverse logistics starts to become difficult. If we don't have brands that are willing to understand what it means to design for circularity, then it's hard to get someone to put that on a label to go out the door to the consumer. If the consumer doesn't know what to do with their clothes after the fact, then it's hard to get it to come all the way back around. So a systemic problem, and like Martine said at the beginning, it's like, every circle's different, but we all are facing some of the same challenges. And if that's what's cool about being able to come in the room together like this and like say, so what's your circularity thing, right? When everyone shows up to the table around the circle, stuff starts to happen. When you have like great design, when you have great tools, when you have great government who's into it, like that's really important too. And when all those things connect, that's when I think we win. And well, darn it, we need some wins.
Yeah, I think we're going to talk a lot about the interconnected system that needs to happen today. Adrian, so back to you. So we heard from Zahlen about Ravel's novel approach to reprocessing the material stream to, engage in remanufacturing, which I think is addressing one challenge that's really commonly seen by some companies. But from your perspective, like, what's the greatest challenge for businesses to become more circular?
I think Zahlen touched upon it. Well, the system for the companies and businesses that succeeded with the linear economy, the paradigm that's existed for at least 100 years now, I think it's going to be really, really difficult for them to move to a more circular economy because their business model, their operations are optimized for a linear economy. It might be easier for startups, new companies are coming out to find out a way, because if they really do consider, as you mentioned, about thinking about the systems, you might be passionate and have this idea about a circular idea, about a product or a technology, but you really, really need to understand the systems that product or technology will interact with and the actors, the impacted parties that influence it. So what happens to clothes at their end of life? Their donation stores, their thrift stores, their waste management companies, and so on, and really understand how that system actually works in order to ensure that whatever you develop, design, is adapted for that, and the incentives are there at each step to make sure. I think there's a focus a bit on the design and product development and making sure it's great, but it doesn't matter much if something's recyclable or recoverable if it actually isn't recycled or repaired or recovered in the end. So you really have to think about all the systems.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and just one thing I find in my line of work being an electrical engineer is like I really care about copper, and like I find that like it's a limited resource, right? And it's been priced incorrectly for a really long time because it's a supply and demand mentality as opposed to realistically, we're not taking into consideration like how much we have left, right? And I think if you start a process with products and you say, we need to find a way to get this back into our system, it really does help with a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think a lot of large companies will have trouble doing that.
Yeah, I think it's going to happen here very rapidly, which I think is why we're seeing so much interest really grow in this field, because in the next 2 decades, we're going to have some really big challenges ahead. Reily, I know, so you talked about this. You've been working on designing hardware products with circularity in mind. Can you speak a little bit more about what that work looks like, but also about how engineers can fit into this system of people? And I think we've been talking a little bit about this system of people that have to come together to make these solutions practical.
Yeah, definitely. So one thing that we've talked about a lot recently too is just kind of, I think, well, the basics are we need a lot of different sensors and different things at different points in the system. From an engineering perspective, there's, figuring out your supply chains and things along those lines, and then also your end of life considerations for a product. I think a lot of that kind of comes into play with engineering. This is when we need to consider what do textiles need in order to determine various fiber content, things like that, and certain things along those lines. I also think that engineers don't solve all the problems. It has to be a mindset shift from business plans and consumer behavior, and also giving responsibility and incentives to corporations in order to make them responsible for the products that they put out there. If somebody has a label and you go to a landfill and you see that label, somebody should be responsible for that product. So I kind of think that's what it needs to be.
Absolutely. Zahlen, so back to you. We've discussed how Ravel is approaching the circular material stream in this novel way, and your end goal is to, make stuff out of that material stream. I saw the sock proposal, very exciting, guys. Socks! I can't wait to buy some socks. What sort of innovations will be helpful in unlocking that end goal? Are you guys trying to do that all under your roof, or are there industry collaborations that you're hoping will enable some of these end goals?
Yeah, that circle is important. I think getting to hang out with guys like Reily, if I can get him to slip up here and you fire him, and then we'll hire him. It's the whole thing, and then
no poaching on stage.
That's right. Next thing on. It is. It takes everybody, and it does. Like Adrian's pointing out here, the linear system is the one that we're built around right now. And so it's easy to walk down the street and say, I want to buy something that can burn this clothing, because that's recycling. And it's a lot harder to conceptualize a elegant solution that answers Adrian's troubles and problems, and that can be elegantly designed with the right understanding of this is the right material, and this should go to this direction, this should go that direction. From a textile standpoint, blended materials, it's the best of all perfect unrecyclable worlds, because it's comfortable, it's stretchy, it's durable, but it's not recyclable unless you have the right technology put in place, and that's what we're building. So in a nutshell, it takes absolutely bolts and steel and PLCs and all the kind of stuff that's necessary, and I hope that if we do it, other people will do it too, and then other people will see that all the cool guys over there are doing that, and then it sort of lifts the whole industry together into something that breaks that linear model, that take, use, waste model, and sort of makes it around into a circle.
Yeah, I love that. I just met somebody here who had the term engineering. The design for end of life is, I think, so critical.
Yeah, if you talk to Joe later.
Yeah,
good stuff.
Yeah. Love that. Reily, to the point of designing for end of life, could you talk a little bit about some of the internal tools that we've been building here at Synapse? Because I think we've seen a market need, and we're trying to respond to that.
I think so. Martine mentioned earlier how there's really all these kind of unique use cases unique products, right? From consumer electronics to textiles to manufacturing vehicles. And I think that the key point here is that when you put something into an engineering design process, it's really helpful to start from the beginning and kind of consider circularity at the top. And so running through example problems and examples with your product, doing whole system mapping to life cycle analyses, and then taking it, through a disassembly map. And then you say, oh, well, now I've planned how to take this thing apart. So that when I need to reclaim it, recycle it, and all this kind of stuff, how do I distribute that into the end of life? And what ends up being perfectly reusable for future products and things like that, reusable in my own product. What can be recycled, melted back down, or repurposed in various upcycling and downcycling processes. And then the other part of that too is just what ends up in the landfill. Obviously, the goal is to reduce that, and some of the tools that we've been using and developing for our own processes, especially for all the types of products that we make, because we have a very wide breadth. It has been challenging, but a very interesting process, and trying to segment those into different product categories and focusing on how do we inform our clients, what is the truth now? What can we aim for? What is realistic with their current product design and current business model? And then, what is palatable in terms of moving forward, in terms of us moving towards circularity? It is a process, especially for companies and products that exist in the moment. I do think it will be easier for startups. Personally, I think that having the mentality going in makes it a lot easier. But yeah, changing that mindset and using tools that are customized for those products are super helpful. And I love doing it. I'm an electrical engineer most of the time, and that's normally what I do. But when I get the opportunity to take things apart and put them through these tools, I really, really enjoy it. And I think some of my coworkers can kind of speak to the fact that I get a little bit preachy when it comes to using these things to help us make better products in the future.
Reily's passion for disassembly is legendary in the engineering team. So if you want to chat with him over cocktails about it, I highly recommend it. Okay, Adrian, so we've been really circling around this concept of these interconnected teams of people that will ultimately be the successful ones who will make progress on implementing circularity. Do you have an opinion on sort of what the role of the government could or should be in this? And do you see these connections happening organically? How do these interconnected teams, really work the best?
I certainly have an opinion on the role of government. Yeah, I mean, to start off, government is often seen as we're the regulator. We can regulate things. But that's a very narrow way of what we can do. Yes, we can pass policies, adopt policies, and pass legislation. But I know that tends to be seen as kind of not very business friendly and not be something that encourages innovation. But policy can actually also create the framework and the conditions to allow the circular economy to flourish. Just examples like last year, we put in a fee for mattresses that are taken to our transfer stations, $30 per mattress. It's cheaper to get it recycled somewhere else. Or we just passed extended producer responsibility for batteries here in the state of Washington. That will really boost a recycling industry for batteries here. So just June 1st, last week, it's official. Expanded polystyrene packaging peanuts are banned in the state of Washington. Stop selling them, stop distributing them. Next year, we'll be addressing the foodware items, cups, plates, but that allows other products to come out, and it creates a level playing field for these other products to come out. I'm fortunate enough to work both in policy, but also market development. We can set up accelerators, which we've been working on together through next cycle. We can give grants, technical assistance, trying to help businesses, communities with their circular economy ideas, and try to see how we build that up together on a local basis. But government can do so many other things. We have the ability to be able to convene the right people to work together. For example, we'd love to convene people and create partnerships within the textile world. A huge issue with the textiles currently going to landfill. One thing is that they're going to landfill, but the environmental impacts throughout the whole life cycle is something that really screams for attention. And we need to figure out how we can work together in doing it. And I don't think that's happening on its own. Some of it might, but I think government can be that kind of catalysator to make it happen. But we can do so many other things. We can set up roadmaps to tell you what will happen or what we want to happen in order you can adapt your business plans for it. We can make procurement rules so contracts are performance-based instead of ownership and things about buying. We can set up things like having data available that you know how many batteries are currently being sent to landfill, or for example, we had a company that wants to recycle contaminated oil containers. We can figure out what's happening to those oil containers. So there's data and things you can use for your market development, for your market feasibility studies, stuff like that. So there's so many things, and we're also really curious about engaging to figure out how we can serve. That, for me, is, I might be a bit too European, the role of government is to serve the communities that we're in, right? It is your money. I mean, but to end it, the role of government is also, yes, circular economy is something we want. I want to divert stuff that goes to our landfill, but we want to also ensure that it's linked with climate action. Those two are not separate issues. And also, we want to also make sure that we take into consideration the underserved and overburdened communities at the same time. All those three things have to happen together. They're not separate for us.
Absolutely. Climate justice. Yeah. Woo. And if you heard the people from the Descendants Project speak yesterday, I think a really powerful message around that.
Okay, so we are going to end with two questions that I want to ask each one of you. First, what's one piece of advice you would give to companies wrestling with circularity challenges? Dylan, let's start with you.
The quick and dirty answer is you. We're going to make this happen. Each of one of you goes back to your desk, to your computer, to your whatever you do on a daily basis, even while you're sleeping. All the things that you engage with on a daily basis, we are all products of a linear system. They're not naturally wired circular economy or circular system contributors. So if you have a chance to just take a little quick mindset shift, and I don't know, take on your walk home, look at your phone, but don't look at the front of it, look at the back of it, and think about everything that went into that phone. And how many phones do you have back at home sitting in a drawer that are just sitting there, right? Bingo. Right? So start with yourself. I don't know, and you bring it to work and bring it to systems and your positions of power and the place where you can call out things that are linear that could be done differently. And if you start to question that, you'll see that there's other people around there questioning it too, and there's people out there that also want to be working on this. Like, we all care, right? We got to get that mindset shift. It's like it can be a leap. It can kind of be a leap. I mean, I'm living it every day, and it's a lot. And sometimes it takes like a really fun, engaging conversation with someone, hopefully today, to get from that 0 to 1 or 1 to 2 or even 8 to 9 or 9 to 10. That would be a pretty good one, right? So yeah, that's my quick, not so quick answer.
I think we're all somewhere on this spectrum of understanding where we sit within the problem and then working on it from our own positions of power and within our own lives.
Well, that's and then when we step up, then we can bring people around us there too, right? And it's everybody.
Yeah. Give yourself some grace and also some pressure, right? You need both. All right, Adrian, what about you?
Building a bit on, I think it's really important. You might know your product, you might know your technology, but again, to what I said earlier, really understanding the systems that they interact with, the networks of entities, people, and communities that they engage with, really understanding that. And then not being afraid of trying to reach out, create those connections, collaborating. What we're already seeing and part of next cycle, which I've been so happy to see, is building that community of folks that really want to engage and do something with circularity. Reach out, whether it's, if you think it's government that can help, a waste management company, a supplier, a nonprofit. Try to work together, because yes, in the end, we can only make an intentional change by doing it together.
Reily?
Yeah, I had an answer before that I was thinking of, but I think based off of what you guys have just said, I would say for companies in general, just not to be afraid of policy changes. I mean, I think realistically, from an engineering perspective, like when we get a new requirement or barrier or things like that, it actually is more fun. Like it's more entertaining. It's harder. It's it gets boring to go into your old bag of tricks and like try the same thing, or well, not even just do the same thing over and over again. And embracing policy changes, I think, with the trust that it is for good. I mean, in general, and climate change. Not all
policies are unfortunately good.
Sure. Focus around this kind of topic, though. I think that typically, like, it is for the benefit of humanity and society, and so on and so forth. I find that, like, there's one specific example of this that I think back a lot on is like when I started, I didn't know that tantalite caps were a conflict good, and like knowing that and like now designing those all out of, I'd never touch them, right? Like it's fun. I don't know. Yeah, I'd say don't be afraid of policy changes when it comes to circularity.
Good policy changes.
Good policy, yeah.
Well, also, I mean, to build on what you said, I think in the next 20 years, we're going to have to deal with a lot of material shortages, a lot of new regulations. If you can get one step ahead of that, I think that's a really powerful incentive for some of these big companies who, are going to have a challenge coming to grips with this.
Yeah, and we see that a lot in Europe with like kind of the teasing of all these kind of repairability scores and things like that, where it's like, when are they actually going to put it in kind of thing? Will they, won't they? But the point is like all these companies are now innovating and prepping for it and trying to get ahead of the curve in a sense so that they don't get penalized for it. So
yeah, and as soon as they start seeing it as a competitive advantage, it'll start happening more rapidly.
It is a competitive advantage. Yeah, we see that in apparel. Absolutely is. For sure.
I mean, we see that a lot in apparel with things like with the organic label too, right? Okay. Second roundtable question, and we're going to end today with a question that, if you're not familiar, we have a podcast called Hardware to Save a Planet. Got to put a little pitch in for Dylan because it's a really excellent podcast. Even if I didn't work at Synapse, I would adore this podcast. And Dylan always ends with a question: who's somebody doing something cool in the space that inspires you? So maybe we'll go in reverse order. Reily, you want to start? Who's somebody doing something cool in circularity that inspires you?
Yeah, I always, probably once or twice a week, I log on to Fairphone's website and I just check in to see what they're doing. I think that they are leading everyone else in terms of what they're trying to do. They're not forcing a market.
For those of you unfamiliar with Fairphone, yes. Can you give us a little background?
They make their goal is to make a perfectly circular phone. And extend the lifespan of the phone using modularity and connectors and things like that, and things along those lines. I think that they're leading in terms of transparency. I think that they are doing an excellent job of making that widely available so that anyone can copy them. They're not forcing a market. They're making a cell phone. And I think that it's really valuable. I mean, if the product is good, people will buy it. So that's my company that I always check out.
Well, thank you. Adrian?
Not including present company. It's going to be difficult to land on one. There have been so many great projects and people involved with Next Cycle. Just to give some example, Josh Epstein from Sustainable Northeast Seattle. He wants to set up a reuse commons in North Seattle, North King County area, a physical place where communities, businesses can meet together, a repair cafe, maker space, reuse building supplies, startups, all there together in one physical location. It'd be great if we get Northgate Mall, transform that totally into something else. Amanda Miller from South King Tool Library, she's great. She's setting up these tool libraries that teach people how to use tools, makes tools accessible and available so people can change their own communities, spaces, even start up their own businesses based on the tools there. Somebody I recently met here at Circularity 23, I believe his name is Andrew Powers, in South King County, Des Moines. He's working with 3D printing out of recycled plastic. And he loves to play with Raspberry Pi and make farm bots. And he's doing this in a residential area and wants to engage with kids. Those are examples that I think are just great.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
I don't have a good answer. But I'll be like a little bit cheesy on it too. It just came to me because I said you before, but we all are facing our individual challenges and where we're going to come from, where we are right now to what that elegant circular future is. And I don't know if this is like the right thing to kick us off to happy hour, but I would love to cheers everybody here and get to know people and hear what you are all up to and what fires you up about innovation and all that kind of stuff. So there's my kind of tossing it back at the room.
All right.
Well, thank you so much, panelists. Now we are going to switch to question and answer. So if anybody has any questions for our panelists, there's a microphone right here in the middle. Feel free to come up. If nobody has any questions, then we'll go back to drinking, eating snacks, and talking with each other. But yeah, there's a microphone here.
Thirstier than I thought. I'm sorry.
Zahlen's ready.
We do want your questions.
Zahlen's ready. Oh, Larry's coming up.
I'm Larry Kalesa, Synapster.
Oh.
Tyler's on.
Hey, hello. A kind of question, comment for Adrian. I grew up in Seattle, and I'm so disappointed to hear your initial comment about how flat our recycling efforts have become. I'm really disappointed about that. Can you give maybe some examples of what you talked about? Food waste. We have systems in place to address that. Is there something? Are there a couple other categories that seem to be probably building supplies?
Yep, definitely.
Others maybe.
I thought the paint was really interesting.
Paint is something that actually we have a paint extended producer responsibility program, Paint Care. So that's actually one of the good things where we're actually reducing how much paint goes to our landfill, and we're getting it out of wastewater systems and so on. But to your answer, loads, packaging. What we've seen in the past 10 years is they're becoming multi-material. And that means before, just think of packaging for 20 years ago. That was mainly paper, glass, and metal. Plastic started showing up, but we didn't have all those pouches, and we didn't have those things that are fancy wraparounds, the aluminum cans, and things that companies say are recyclable. Colgate toothpaste tubes. They are not recyclable within our current system. So I think that's what's led to it. And residents are getting confused because they're being told different things. And unfortunately, we don't have the same rules for what is accepted as recyclable throughout King County, let alone the state of Washington. In the city of Walla Walla, they don't even recycle glass or plastic bottles. Plastic bottles are some of the most valuable materials. And Walla Walla produces so much wine. Why can't they recycle their own bottles? But I mean, I think you answered the question with clothes. Clothes have also changed in the past 10 years. And I think that's a lot of what's driving it.
Can I jump in too?
Yeah.
Yeah, the who stands to win is the linear economy. When we don't put something, when it's not easy for us to put something in the right bin, somebody else is making money. And money talks and money drives things. And so there's a design for circularity. There's a set of tools. Talk to Reily afterwards. That all these things that do make it easier for this stuff to be actively processed. And it's not like they're slacking. It's definitely not that. It's all of us and sort of the drive of the linear economy and the consumer culture and all these kind of things. So it's easy to point a finger at it, but make sure you're pointing at everybody too and recognizing like all that money and who wins when the multi-material sandwich wrapper that's on the grab and go shelf at the airport. Like, who wins when that ends up in the trash? It's not the circular economy. So we have work to be done. There's work to be done. Yeah.
Maybe if I might also just add, just to your point, when we look at some of the consumer electronic products out there, they have gone to become more integrated, which is great. They become lighter, they become flasher, but this assembly is getting also really difficult. And before, some of us might be able to repair our own computers. Right now, it's really, really difficult if you want to repair your own phone or computer. And there are some companies that intentionally make it really, really difficult. So those are also things where makes it, those are barriers that have happened over the past 10 years.
Yeah, and just to wrap the podcast again, there's one company that's actually trying to undo that, a company called Framework. They're a startup, and their goal is to send you one laptop that you use for 10 years, and it's intended to be easy to disassemble and fully upgradable. Highly recommend checking them out. They're sort of the Fairphone of laptops. And I think it's really interesting because they're actually bringing, I think, a considerable amount of pressure on the market to follow suit. So I think that's one exciting way that, if consumer pressure mounts enough, we will succeed in sort of turning this cruise ship around. We will succeed in turning this linear economy more circular by dint of consumer opinion. So get out there and use your positions of power and let companies know your displeasure at their, multi-threaded packaging or things that are hard to recycle.
Yeah, and one thing that we've talked about at Synapse too, internally, is this idea around what can I recycle in Seattle, and we've talked a lot about some of the stuff we work in is machine learning, artificial intelligence, all this kind of stuff, and vision systems and sorting, all this kind of thing. And how do you provide that level of confidence when I go to the, recycling bin with something, two different things, or that classic thin film plastic that says, oh, it's got a recycling symbol on it. I'm not going to really look at it, but it says store drop off, that bullshit. Right? How do we avoid that? How do we tell people, maybe, hey, you have a level of transparency that, we can add to the system to help inform. Yeah, and Walla Walla, they can't recycle glass, right? That is a little ridiculous, but at least informing people so maybe they can find alternative streams to get rid of that stuff. I mean, it is, there is innovation to be had around this kind of thing. It's unfortunate that we have unique recycling systems for everywhere. Not to mention we offshore a ton of it.
Let's give Walla Walla a little bit of credit. And actually, there's a group from the next cycle program that is looking to fix that. Right? There's innovation for you. Next cycle, coming together.
There's a lot in process.
Yeah.
I think we actually have that demo of our visual. We have a demo. I think it's in our product showcase, which is around the corner. So if you haven't seen that, feel free to grab a Synapser and go over there with a cocktail and check it out. It's pretty cool.
Procyon, which is the Latin word for raccoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
John Ross, this guy in the flat shirt down here, is one of the creators. Yes. Another question.
Could each of you explain what are the personal choices that you guys are grappling with and trying to work on to be better yourself as an individual?
Yeah.
Oh, that one hits hard.
Yeah. Probably the same as a lot of people. I mean, if you kind of can't unsee some things when you're in this line of work, I have to remind myself to not be desensitized sometimes to hey, another greenwashing campaign by a major fashion label, haha, funny, huh? But no, this stuff is real. It's bad. So I struggle in the everyday decisions. Absolutely. In the apparel world, you can pick your waste hierarchy and try and operate as high up there as you can, and repair. Don't buy it in the first place. There's all sorts of different choices like that. Some of the hardest ones are unlearning. It's not learning to do new things. It's unlearning things that I've done for most of my life that are normal, because that's the way we were brought up. That's the way, we get a little bit funky here, but that's the way someone paid someone else to tell us how we were supposed to live our lives, because someone else made money on that. Unlearning that's, I think, it hurts. It's a hit to the kidney sometimes. You can't go back. So it's a lot of stress. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. That's, I mean, yeah, fundamentally, like, I, try not to buy like new clothes from the store, all Goodwill, thrift mostly, for these shoes, unfortunately. And then, things like that. I think also focusing in on, we make consumer electronics here. And so like one of my biggest concerns is batteries, and of trying to figure out how to phase that out of electronics is like one of my little side projects that I like to work on, like that.
One of my vices is definitely, I like to learn, I like to understand. I'm an engineer. I want to understand how things work. I want to understand things, but there's not enough time in the day, in the week, in the month, in the year to go down all the rabbit holes that I want to do to understand all the things and how they function. So I need to focus, I need to prioritize and figure out where is it I can have the most impact. And that's definitely a struggle. Because there's so many things that are so cool to work on.
If I could hop, no. Just one more thing. I had a crisis of conscience a few years ago where I said, I need to quit my job and go work in wind energy. And I was telling a friend who's an environmental justice lawyer, and she said, don't you work for a technology firm? Why don't you do more with that? And so that has contributed to me being really passionate about this work that Synapse has been doing on our people and planet side, so especially the planet work. So I'm excited to see it flourishing in today. Yes.
Yeah, thank you all for sharing your experience. That's nice to hear. My question was, Adrian, you mentioned that policy is a lever, and so I'm wondering if Reily and Zahlen, you can share a policy intervention that helped you innovate.
Ooh, that's a great one.
I can, repairability. So the European Union and also the right to repair in the United States, I think is a huge motivator. I think the layers upon layers of plastics and things that we put and adhesives and all this kind of stuff that we add to products to make them thinner, lighter, all this kind of are relatively unnecessary, except for the perceived experience. So for me, avoiding those things in particular, when we talk about, and also when we go into design reviews and things like that and saying, like, why are we doing this? Like, or do we need to do this? What is the requirement around this? Can we get around this? Those are huge things that have motivated me in that aspect. And those are two policies that, are, I think, I hope there's more enforcement of right to repair in the United States. I think it will be critical for kind of the future of vehicle industry, automotive, also in the laptop space, consumer electronics, all that kind of stuff. Making it easier for people, more transparent. And I think a great example of that is iFixit. They do a good job, and they have a standard that they, their own standard that they work to. And I love going on there and seeing teardowns of things. I think it's really, really helpful to understand what we can all do better when it comes to just designing.
A general comment, but I kind of point to Europe on some of this, and it's interesting because some senses we say they're quite a ways ahead of us. And I'll talk this textile world specifically, but there are other examples, and this guy was going to know all about him for sure because it's his job. But on my side of things, I see what happened with consumer electronics in Europe, and then I see how long it took for that move to come across the water to here in the States and Canada as well. And then I see what's happening now and what has happened in textiles and clothing. And I'm hopeful that at worst, we're that far behind. But in reality, we're around the corner. And we're like that much more globally connected as a humanity. So that these things are actually a lot more reasonable to see some of that same legislation and regulation happening here in the States soon. It's already happening. It's happening in California. It's happening in a couple other states. And it's obvious stuff. It's not like complex. It's not complicated. It's like, do the right thing, do the smart thing, don't burn stuff that it should be burned. Don't dump it overseas. Don't dump it in the global south. Like, it's like, right, duh, right? But it takes time. It takes collaboration, coordination. It takes making sure that everybody's on the same page. We get it right, because once you write it, it's hard to unwrite it. So in a sense, we're lucky that we get to look to Europe a little bit for that guidance. And then once it hits here, I guarantee that it's going to be fast, and like innovation is going to be where we're going to get ahead of those 2030 goals and those 2025 goals and those 2050 goals that any of your companies, any of the companies you engage with are all focused on. Don't wait for that. You need to be innovating. You need to be understanding how the circular economy is going to play a role in that sooner than we think. For me in textiles, for sure, but in the other industries as well. So, half answer. Sorry.
It's interesting because I think the U.S. is far behind Europe in that particular instance, but in some others, so the Inflation Reduction Act put really significant investments into things like carbon capture. So in some ways we're ahead in policy, and in some ways we're way behind. So it's interesting to see us trying to catch up globally. Next question.
Yeah, thanks to the panel, of course. My perception, which may or may not be correct, is that a lot of the focus in circular economy is on reducing things to raw materials, re-injecting back in the value stream. As far as kind of working higher up the value stream in terms of component and whole product reuse, repurposing, and near to my heart, upfitting and retrofitting, how much opportunity is there, and what do you see as some of the big opportunities?
Interesting.
I know you have a great answer.
I think one of the major things that we need to question is ownership. Who owns the product, and do we really need to own things? I think product as a service business models offers a lot of things that, if done right, will be able to ensure that materials, products are kept within the economy for the longest use possible. And there's a possibility to upgrade things. Because when you no longer own a car, a phone, it is just the service, the utility, the value, the functionality that you get out of it, then it is a company or service provider's job to make sure that it is in their interest that those assets are maintained for as long as possible, and they're upgradable, repairable, and so on. So for me, if anything, that's one thing that I think we need to address.
There's this one company that I'm always looking for them to update their website, because I don't actually know what they're doing, but I like their idea. It's to your point about retrofits and things like that. It's called Blue Dot. They do vehicle retrofits for electric vehicles. Oh, there's
That was good.
That's awesome. Okay, well, I'll talk later, because I'm very on the website. Okay, cool, yeah. All right.
Do you have any web designers in the house? Tom on the road too could really use some help.
Yeah, well, all right. Well, then you already know.
But not everybody does. So not everybody has met Tom and Martine.
Well, all right. I'm just going to compliment you, I guess. So I really like the idea of not getting rid of things. And so this kind of comes up with something you said earlier. Should we buy new things? Like, and I think the automotive industry is going through a moment where electric cars are very, very popular and sensationalized. And I think that they're great. I think they're better than we currently have. I don't necessarily think that means that we need to get rid of old cars. I think that, if we were able to retrofit them with, hybrid electric, retrofits and things like that, which is what they're working on. And converting older cars to electric or hybrids, I think that would be awesome. I think it's a great way to be sustainable and not have to make something new, as well as getting rid of petroleum, a lot of our products. So.
Yeah, our IP is based on recovery materials, so that's why there might be pigeonholing the conversation there a little bit from the things that I'm saying. But that waste hierarchy is crucial in that, like, we're not taking anything off the racks at Goodwill, and we're not taking anything out of the bins after it's not made it off the racks. So it's like, it's a diversion from landfill question, but again, pointing back at y'all, like, do you need to buy that new shirt, or can you rent it? Can you engage with those new business models that are out there? And it's kind of normal for a lot of the people that are younger than me, I'll just say that. It's fascinating. It's so cool to see that someone doesn't necessarily want to buy something, but they would rather rent it. I mean, it's a very inspiring value proposition. And I think as we get more of those people coming into leadership and positions of power, that we're going to see a big shift in the way that we typically think about those old linear systems that we're kind of married to accidentally or brainwashed into.
And it also provides the ability that don't own it, you can share it more easily. You can provide more access to it, because the earth is abundant in many ways. But when we accumulate things for personal, because it's ours to own, that the concept of sharing doesn't happen. And I think there's a lot more to be done with sharing that goes with it.
I think it's interesting that a lot of people who use companies like Stitch Fix or Rent the Runway don't even see it as a circularity play or an eco warrior thing. They're just doing it because actually this is a great way to not own things, is actually in some ways better for our lives. So I look forward to a world in which that's more and more common. All right, that may be the greatest accidental compliment ever happened on stage. Completely anonymous. Next question.
Hi, my name is Hugh, and our company is about sustainability. So we are clothing, so we completely understand the situation of textiles and garments right now in landfills. So my question is, how that we can make the where or which channels do you recommend for us for startup that making impact in King County specific or in Washington State in general, that we can connections or grow our business into sustainability wave? And if you can recommend that for all of us, that's really helpful for our business. Thank you.
I say Next Cycle's the best thing. Next Cycle is a program that King County initiated with funds initially from the State Department of Ecology. We work with the Department of Commerce. They're really good at business. They have loads of money. We work with Seattle Public Utilities and the Seattle Office of Economic Development. That might bore you all because it's not important. What we found is if you are a business, a community, you can't navigate all our agencies and figure out the rules of who does what and things. Next Cycle is this place where it doesn't matter which agency, it's what's your idea, what help do you need? And there's a great group of teams, they're consultants, they've been doing this for many years, they have the connections, and they can point you out in the right direction. I'm not saying it's always easy working with government. It can be very bureaucratic. There are things that we need to respect because of transparency, because it's not our money, and rules and stuff like that. But here's a place that we've created that is able to help you out. And it's governed, it was co-designed together with folks that weren't just from the agency, but from private businesses, community-based organizations and nonprofits. And having that whole idea of increasing accessibility, whether it's terms of languages, writing those proposals, setting up trusted mentees in the communities that we would love to see projects from, that's what we do. So Next Cycle, WA, go to that, and there is contact, and there are folks that can help you out. We're wrapping up the first iteration of Next Cycle. The State Department of Ecology is going to take the management over. It's no longer King County that will be the lead, but we will still be involved. So there will be a new round. Look out for that later this year.
You can connect with Adrian while we have cocktails, which we're just about to do. We have 2 minutes left. Anybody else? Any questions? Yeah, one more.
Martine, you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act and carbon capture. And I wondered, in the world of circularity and electronics, what are the opportunities for bringing circularity into the Digital Equity Act and the funding that is available, picking up that point about social impact, underserved communities, as well as environmental benefit?
Great question.
I can definitely say that we've been supporting a right to repair here in the state of Washington. We had 2 years in a row where we've tried. A lot of what it is about digital access. We want to be able to have those computers, phones, and so on to be repaired in local communities, to be made available to the communities. There are so much electronics that goes to waste, and it could serve those communities in so many ways. But it's also about building up the capabilities, because repair shops, some of the local repair shops are struggling. They don't have access to the manuals. They don't have access to the spare parts. A lot of it's shut out. You might be able to go to an Apple store, but it's going to cost a bomb, and it might not even get repaired locally. So it's about ensuring that schools, the communities have access to that, and right to repair is one way of helping that. There are many other things that should be done, but.
Oh, just one last little piece on that. The linear economy in the way that it's currently exists has for decades been creeping on to dumping its unaccounted for waste on the global south and disenfranchised people. And so by default, the existing system is part of the problem. And so I believe that the way that circularity plays into that is actually calls into question the unaccounted for costs that we take for granted. Like when we're done with our clothing, if it ends up burned overseas, that smoke goes somewhere, that hits somebody else first, hits us after that. But we have a circular system in place. It sort of has the opportunity to break that system. And so it can serve that well, I think.
Right. Well, thank you all so much for the great conversation here. I highly recommend that after over cocktails that you continue this conversation with panelists, but also all with each other. Thank you very much for coming.